the lane. 15-10. Touchdown, Chargers.
What's up, guys? Welcome into a Week 4 edition of Chargers Weekly. As always, joined by Matt Money Smith. And Money, this is a turn-the-page episode to Houston after Sunday's 38-10 defeat to Jacksonville. I was just saying, I haven't talked to you since Sunday. Before the game, I talked to you. So I figured, get your thoughts, figured out what went wrong Sunday and what needs to be corrected come this Sunday in Houston.
Well, I think the easy answer is everything. Everything went wrong on Sunday. They went into a game down key pieces, again, with no Lindsley and Keenan in JC, and that was apparent. The fact that Joey, the second Joey went out, you just saw the pass rush disappear. They started doubling Khalil. We saw a really stout run defense the first 2 weeks. That disappeared in that game. Run defense got gashed. Really got pushed around up front on both sides of the ball. I thought Jacksonville was way more physical, way more urgent than the Chargers were. And it was just, and we've seen it. Look, we've seen it with this team, and they still won 9 games last year. We've just seen these sort of blips. It happened last year to the Texans. It happened last year against the Ravens, where just seemingly everything goes wrong, and it's just hard for this team to reset and recover. They did a good job of it. The defense held strong that first half. The fact that it was a 16-10 game in the third quarter, I think, was a testament to how well the defense was playing. That should have been a 3-touchdown game, by the middle of the third quarter, but the fact that they were able to bow up, on those goal-to-goes and just give up a couple field goals was huge. And I think that, kind of speaks to some of the, sort of hope and a positive that you can maybe carry through the rest of the season, after finding out that Joey's having groin surgery and is going to be out quite some time. So, I think this is, you put it best, you flush it, you move on from this game, because really there could not be more things that went wrong in a single contest. Justin clearly was not feeling it, was dealing with the rib fracture, and you could just see him opening up on a lot of throws. His accuracy wasn't there. But then there were those Justin plays, the wow moments, the touchdown throw, the 54-yarder to Jalen Guyton. So, it's good to see that those flashes are still there. So, he's still capable of doing it. It's just starting to get comfortable with that injury, because that's going to take a while. It's going to be like a month probably before he's starting to feel like he's on the rebound. So I think the lingering concerns from that game are certainly the offensive line. If you were to ask me to rank the most important players on the Chargers, obviously it starts with Justin. I would put Slater at number 2. When you have a left tackle that you don't have to worry about, and you don't have to send help, and you don't need tight ends, and you don't need running backs to chip, it changes everything when you only have to worry about one side. So now they're down what I believe is their number 2 most important player of the season, and I would probably put Joey at 3. 3 or 4, would be Joey or Derwin in that 3 or 4 spot. So now you're talking about being down 2 of your top 4 players for the rest of the season, or at least most of it in the case of Joey. And, time to rally and time to find some depth and time to find out, kind of what Brandon Staley and his coordinators and Tom Telesco and his staff are able to do with some depth pieces to salvage, what is a promising roster otherwise for the rest of the season.
Yeah. So you'll learn a lot about this team, I think, on Sunday after what happened last Sunday. To your point about the defense, I agree with you. When you run 75 plays like Jacksonville ran, I mean, that's a huge volume of plays, and the defense hung in there in the first half. They were on the field for almost 39 minutes of the game. I mean, that's
they wore down.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you're going to wear down. Justin clearly is not going to be himself. I mean, we knew that going into this. Like, he's not going to be the Justin Herbert from last year with this rib injury. So you have to pick him up. Mike only had 1 catch. The offense was just out of sync. Yeah, you mentioned, like, we saw the flashes, right? We saw like that 54-yarder to Jalen and some of these throws, but in large part, Justin was a little off, and with good reason. The offensive line, I agree with you. I think Rashawn Slater and Corey Linsley, like, it kind of sucks that now when Linsley maybe comes back, you're taking Rashawn away, right? And now they got to figure out kind of a new combination on that line. It looks like Jamari Sawyer is going to be the left tackle Sunday, and I'm
I'll
good
tell
with
you,
that.
Chris, yeah, I think that's a great sign. Storm had a rough go. He had a really rough go. I know on PFF it was 7 pressures on 25 snaps. I counted fewer than that. I counted essentially, not so much 25, but like kind of 18 legitimate dropbacks. 7 pressures on 18 legit dropbacks. The other 7 were kind of just quick outs, and there was just never any threat of pressure. But with the rib injury, you just can't get those quick beats, and that's what Storm was allowing. It was just, if it was Arden Key or Trayvon or Josh Allen, they were just blowing by him so fast. And even though Herbert's so good at feeling pressure and recognizing it in his periphery and getting rid of the ball, it's the rib injury. Like, you can't afford to let him take those hits. So kudos to the coaching staff to say, yeah, look, we could probably do this. Storm did it last year. Let's just say, it was bad go for him and trust that he'll have a bounce back. So I give them props for saying, no, we can't do that again. Storm's great as a swing. We can put him in there for a few plays at a time if we need be, but we got to try something else. And, there were a lot of people in the media, that cover the draft, former scouts or draft experts, that were incredibly surprised to see Jamari drop like he did, especially considering he was the best O-lineman for Georgia all season, one that Kirby Smart was willing to move around that line for whatever they needed, kick him inside when they need to slow down interior rush, put him at left tackle when they need to slow down edge rush all season long. So let's see it. He's a strong dude, limited a little bit athletically, which is why he dropped. The measurables, he's not quite as big as you might like your left tackle to be, but, that's why Rashawn dropped to 13, even though he had the best technique of anyone in the draft. So we've seen that be a success for the Chargers, and, the hope is that's going to work. That he can at least slow down people enough. And I think if you get Corey back, and you have that interior, look, Matt's had a rough go this year. Matt Filer's had a rough go. Yeah. So if you can get Corey back,
next to him helps.
That's what I mean. I think if you get Lindsley back for this game, and now you have that interior, you feel great about Zion. He really only had one busted legit pressure in that game, and otherwise I thought he played really well. So I think if you can get that 3-man back on the interior, at least Justin knows he can climb the pocket. If there's edge pressure coming, he can step up and deliver strikes, to Mike and Keenan and get this thing moving. So, look, it's a lot of hope. There's Jerry Hughes having a good year. He might be an old man in his 13th season, but he's still a damn good pass rusher. So either Trey or Jamari are going to have to deal with that, and it's not going to be easy. The Texans probably on paper have, one of the lesser rosters in the NFL. They are still in full-on rebuild mode, but they can still make plays, and that defense has played pretty darn well through 3 games this season.
Place is going to be a lot louder than it was on December 26th of last year, too. I mean, there's still some excitement and a little bit of hope with that franchise here in September. And they played the Colts very well for 3.5 quarters in week 1 at home. They were on the road the last 2 weeks, kept it close in Denver. Probably should have won in Chicago. Yeah. And now they're coming back home. And
yeah, I mean, look,
you go ahead.
Two picks, in Chicago. Like you said, probably should have won that game. They were in the game till the final 5 minutes against the Broncos, and then you have a Colts game that somehow they let a 20-3 lead in the fourth quarter just slip away. So Lovey's a good coach, man. Lovey can coach D. For whatever people want to say about him being sort of a retread and why is he getting another chance, and what are the Texans thinking? Look, he can coach defense. He has always been able to do that. And it's considering all the injuries on offense, I think, today when we're doing this, we'll know a lot more, when Sunday comes around of who's available. But, man, we talked to Brandon on Monday on Petros and Money, and I thought he made a good point. I just said, trying to overcome all of this adversity, what's the message of the team? How do you do? And he said, well, look, we're looking for some good news as well. Yeah, we got bad news, but we're hoping there's good news, that can help, sort of stem the tide of the bad news. And I think that's, what you can hope for. And I think that's what they need. They've got to have some good news on the J.C. Jackson, Corey Linsley, Keenan Allen front, at least one of those pieces, and hopefully all 3.
Yeah, no question. And just go back to the offensive line real quick. Sawyer's the best option. He's the best option at this point on the roster at left tackle. What's concerning to me, Money, is just the inability to run the football, especially when you know your quarterback is ailing, and that's the best way to help him. And they couldn't do it. I mean, that first half, Austin had 2 rushes for 0 yards. I think they are averaging 2.6 or 2.8 on the year, which is last in the league by a wide margin. We didn't see Josh Kelly in this game at all, and I just wonder, is it they can't run it with Corey being out, or they're having difficulty, or they're not sticking with it, or something else? I don't know, but I just feel like a running game against, especially the Texans are last in the league against the run. I feel like that has to show up on Sunday.
Well, I think there's a lot there, and just I kind of think back to, and it was 2 years ago, just how much we saw Keenan and Mike involved in the run game. There's just a ton of motion, and those guys are moving, pre-snap, and you're seeing Austin behind Keenan and Austin behind Mike, and just how willing of blockers. And Hunter Henry was here, and he was a great all-around tight end. And, they need to get back to that. There needs to be more, and I don't know how this is going to come off sounding, but he's got to be more creative. There has got to be more creativity in the run game. You got to say, like DeAndre Carter on jet sweeps, like just hand him the reverse. They were down 21 points when they tossed in the reverse on Sunday. Like that's not the time, when that's going to have a legitimate shot at success. Like you can't have Sony carrying the ball more than Austin. You just, like, to me, that doesn't make sense to me. Commit to it, get creative. If you can't run to the right, and Trey has really struggled in run blocking this year. He's just getting beat and missing assignments, and guys are in the backfield way too quick. So there's a lot that goes into it. I think it's 1, play design, 2, blocking, and 3, I do think it's running back ability. I just haven't seen enough carries from Austin that you can't have 4 carries for 5 yards. Guys got to carry it more.
Yeah.
Especially when it was a 16-10 game in the third quarter. Like, I get it. It's 21.
They didn't get off script till late,
Yeah. So, like, that doesn't work for me. And I don't need, I don't think I need to see Sony getting more reps running the ball than Austin. I just that also doesn't work for me. So I think there's a lot that I would assume that I think we'll see different in the game. We saw it last year. Look, we saw Austin put up 1,500 combined yards and 20 touchdowns. We know Lombardi can scheme it up, and he can call a hell of a game, in the run game. He had nearly 1,000 yards rushing. He had, 8 rushing touchdowns, I think, 12 receiving touchdowns, or his reverse maybe, 12 and 8, whatever. It's there. We know it's there. We know it can be called. We know it can be drawn up. We know they're certainly capable of it. Just got to do it. Got to go out and execute it. Got to call it. Got to execute it. And I think we're gonna see it. Like, I legit think we're gonna see the return of the run game, just kind of knowing the situation they're in, the defense that they're facing, and I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see, more opportunities for Austin and more availability of Austin in this game.
Yeah, and Josh Kelly, I feel like in the limited touches he had in the first 2 weeks, he looked really good running the ball. He only had 1 carry last week. I asked Coach Staley about just the development of Isaiah Spiller yesterday, and he said Isaiah's come along. Obviously he's going to have to beat out Sony and Josh for a chance to get on the roster, and the kicking game has a part in that. So we'll see. I don't know. It doesn't sound like we'll see Isaiah this week, but maybe in the near future if he can do that. But at the same time, I'd like to see Josh get in there and get into a little bit of a groove, because there were some stretches in that Vegas game in particular. There was one drive where he was really kind of pacing the offense, getting some tough yards, and I'd like to see him in the first half, maybe have that opportunity.
Yeah, I think all 3 of those guys all 3 of them can play. We saw Sony get some tough yards. But, I just kind of go back to the interception. Like, if that's Austin, that ball's not popping off his hands and popping up and turning into a pick. It did for Sony.
He's the most sure-handed back in the league.
Exactly. It's like that's a pick that's on Sony. It's not on Justin. It's to me, and it's not even 60-40, 70-30. It's 100% on Sony. So, like, to me, I think with this roster, with the confidence they have in this roster, with how they looked the first 2 weeks against Vegas and the Chiefs, I think the idea was, hey, Austin takes a beating, and we're making a Super Bowl run, and we have got to make sure that we do not run him into the ground by week 10, to some degree like he has been, because he takes so much contact. He doesn't want to go down. I say it repeatedly. He bounces off initial contact, and he is all about yards after initial contact, yards after contact, and after the catch, he does it all. So my guess is that calculus has now changed. It's gone from, hey, we need to keep him safe and healthy as possible for a sustained playoff run to, we got to make the playoffs. We got to win some games, while we're waiting for some of these injured players to come back. And I think that's the shift in the calculus as well, and why you're going to see a lot more Austin this week against Houston.
And, Bunny, you know what? Things change, too, when Mike Williams gets the football. And, week 1, 2 catches. Last week, 1 catch for 15 yards, a touchdown. In Kansas City, 8 for 113. He was targeted 10 times. So without Keenan, Mike's got to be the guy. So what I saw in week 2 is if you throw it in his vicinity, he's probably going to catch the ball. So a little bit more Mike Williams, too, I think, in this game. Yeah,
I'll tell you, it's been an interesting start to the season. Just
right
from what we were coming off last year, top 5 offense in every category, to now an offense that total yards, however you want to look at it, whatever numbers you want to check out and where that slots, the Chargers fine. I'm just saying from an eyeball test, there's just no explosive plays. The ball is not getting pushed downfield. That was Jalen Guyton's second target of the season, and it was his first reception, and you saw what he was capable of doing. Now, unfortunately, he's gone for the year, and that 4.3 speed is gone with it. So, with the signing of Hightower and the elevation of Jason Moore, they've got to find that speed. But we've talked about Mike. Mike may be a 4.5 guy, but Mike's a 90-10 guy instead of a 50-50 guy. So you can push that ball downfield and especially challenge these corners, challenge Desmond King and the rookie Derek Stingley, challenge these Houston corners to make a play on one of the best wide receivers in the league. Get Justin to push this ball. And that's the other problem, with the run game. Teams they should fear Justin's arm, and instead they're creeping up. They're creeping up because they just don't see it. I think they're last in explosive plays. I think they've had 1 explosive run. Or no, I think they've had 0 explosive runs and 2 explosive passes this season. They are dead last in the league. And, passes over 20 yards, runs over 10 yards. The Chargers are last. That's crazy. That is just crazy through 3 games to see. So, that even if you just take the shot, and I'll be honest, I don't care if it ends in an interception. I just, I don't. If you want to just get that fear of Justin Herbert's arm and Mike Williams' catch radius planted into the head of the defensive coordinator and the defensive players so they're not creeping so much, just because it hasn't been there. It has not been there all season, and I think they have to get that to show up, and that's going to open up things for the run game to be more successful. I mean, you watch. When they snap the ball and they hand it off, there's 8 guys firing at the line of scrimmage and making tackles, and they have to lighten that box.
Flip it to the defense, and we talked about Sawyer. Looks like Chris Rumpf's going to get that shot on the other side of Khalil Mack for Joey Bosa, and there's not a ton of depth behind those guys now. You got him and Kyle Van Noy, so it changes everything, Money. We talk about the pass rush, but you've said it repeatedly here that you think Joey's maybe the overall best defensive end in the game because of his ability to stop the run. And we certainly saw what happened when he went out of the game. And that's going to be a problem. Damian Pierce, this rookie, is having a pretty good start to the season. And we know what Rex Burkhead did to this team last year, and he's the number 2 guy, and he gets some run.
Yeah, I mean, Damian's been up and down, but he's a solid back. He's a big back. I liked him at Florida. I thought he was a legit option for the Chargers in one of those middle rounds. He's
got a hip injury, but I think he's practicing today.
He's practicing today, yeah. So, I think you just said it. I think that a big part of the Chargers' success through that first half was Joey and Khalil against the run on the edges. Yeah. And Austin and Sebastian had a great game. I know you see 38 points and it's like, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, that dude was active. He was in the backfield. He was stuffing runs. So, look, you still have Austin, Sebastian in the middle of that, and you still have, Drew Tranquill who's exceptional at run fits. So the key's going to be that other edge. If it's Van Noy or if it's Rumpf, And it's great to see that Chris put on that weight in the offseason because that's going to be a big part of setting that edge and containing the runs. And we saw that in the preseason. You know, Chris didn't just rush the passer and get sacked, but he had a couple tackles for loss. He set the edge pretty well. And that's going to be a lot. I mean, look, you're talking about Joey Bosa and the drop-off from Joey Bosa. It's nothing against Kyle Van Noy or Derek Tuska if he's going to get in there or Chris Rumpf, but it's going to be a significant drop because, as I've said, Joey is the best all-around defensive end in the NFL when you combine pass rushing and run stopping. So that's something they're going to have to figure out. And I would assume you're going to see a heavy dose of Dameon Pierce and Rex Burkhead running in the direction of Rumpf or Van Noy. And that's going to be up to, and you know, and I think another thing that came out of that game is just the offense that Doug Peterson was running with Trevor Lawrence, all those RPOs. Man. And you got to diagnose and you got to attack. And they repeatedly went after Kenneth. And it's like, hey, man, you got to decide and go. And I think you just saw some of that hesitation from Kenneth in those RPOs, and that's why they were constantly running them in his direction. So I think you're going to see some of that with Davis Mills as well this week with Dameon or with Burkhead. And like you said, we saw it last year. Now, considerably different interior of the line. And remember last year they had like 15 guys out with COVID as well. Yeah. So, you know, it was a disaster of a game from a personnel standpoint. I don't expect to see that again. Burkhead's not getting a lot of carries. He's getting a few here and there. I think he had a handful of carries against the Colts, but otherwise it was like 0 against the Broncos, and I think he just had a couple against the Bears. So, yeah, they gotta bottle up because Davis has been shaky. You know, Davis Mills been shaky. He had a good game against the Chargers last year, but, you know, if you can get JC back out there with Asante and Derwin's on the field and Nas, you know, they should be able to deal with the pass catchers. You know, Brandon Cooks isn't really having a great year thus far, even though he played really well last year. So this defense should, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. They better be able to slow down the Texans offense. It's not a great offense.
Yeah, you know, 38-10. I'm not saying J.C. Jackson would have made the difference in the game by any stretch, but
would have helped.
Would have helped, right? And, you know, we'll see. As of now, as we tape this, we don't know whether or not he's going to play on Sunday, but it's just been tough because he hasn't been in there for the last, or for I guess 2 of the 3 games, and you know that was a game where you said it, man. Doug Peterson, I think he put on just an offensive clinic. The way that he used Trevor, and just listen, the Jags are good. The Jags are good. Trevor Lawrence is exceptional. Everyone was laughing at the Christian Kirk deal and the Zay Jones deal and the Evan Ingram deal. They all seem to be playing as a team. ETN is back. Robinson had that 50-yard touchdown. And then defensively, that front seven, pretty darn good. So I'm not saying that the Chargers underestimated the Jags, but I think as a whole, that loss may not look as bad as it felt on Sunday, maybe later on in the year when you see the Jags continuing to win games.
Yeah, I think Coach Staley, and he's so great with this. That's the first thing he said. He's like, look, I got to do a better job. He's like, they got me. They got us in this one. And like you said, Doug he had a plan. And he's a great coach. Guy won a Super Bowl. You know, it's like he's part of, you know, he was Andy Reid's #1 guy for 7-8 years. You know, he's learning under the best offensive play caller in the league. He carried that over to Philadelphia. He made Carson Wentz a legit MVP candidate. He made Nick Foles a Super Bowl MVP. Doug Peterson can freaking coach. And like I said, I think that's kind of some of the creativity that we're talking about. I mean, when you were watching, you saw all the pre-snap motion with Christian Kirk, with tight ends, with Zay Jones, with Marvin, you know, running both NTN and James Robinson, flanking Trevor on those RPOs, not knowing where the mesh was going to be on those plays. And then recognizing, okay, I got something. This RPO is not working for Kenneth right now. Let's just ride it. Let's ride it. And they rode it all the way down the field for a touchdown. So I think I think there was a macro and a micro for the Chargers because of how good they felt about this team, especially through the first 2 weeks. And I think now it is just exclusively micro. What do we need to do to win this game? Preservation, all that sort of stuff. Reps, are we putting too much on this player and that player? That's all out the window. And that's why I do think, I think Sunday you're going to see a considerably different looking offensive game plan than we've seen in the first 3 games. I
said this on Monday, and obviously the team is only focused on Houston, but I'm almost looking at the next 2 weeks on the road as being such a pivotal part to getting the season back on track with games at Houston, at Cleveland. You know how Cleveland runs the football. You know how they chew clock, and you know all about Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney. I guess we'll know more about Garrett's status this week. And
I think they said he's going to play, probably.
Yeah.
I think they said they think he's going to play, so he seems like, good to hear. You hate to hear about a guy freaking flipping a sports car.
That's
so,
awful.
Especially one that big.
Awful.
Not the car that big, a guy that big and a car that small, and all the stuff that can go wrong with that. So happy to hear that he's okay. But look, Myles Garrett's, he's in the conversation as the most indomitable force in the NFL, along with Aaron Donald. I mean, so, and Clowney has been solid on the other side. They've got, as I'm pulling up, just like you said, you don't want to look too far ahead and focus on the Texans. But, man, when you look at that defense and you think about, J.O.K. Owusu-Koramoah and what a heat-seeking missile he is in the middle. The secondary struggled a little bit. For all of the celebration of Denzel Ward, it's been a little bit of a struggle there. So I think maybe, there's some availability there, but you got to have time, and you're talking about Jamari Sawyer and Trey Pipkins going up against Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney. That's what makes this game so important. That may be a huge ask on defense, combined with an offense that's just going to run the heck out of it with two of the best backs in the league in Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, and just churn clock and try to wear your defense down. So that's why this week is so important.
For Sawyer too, like get that start under your belt before Myles Garrett, right?
Exactly, 100%. Before it's Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney, deal with Jonathan Grainyard and Jerry Hughes. Let's try to use that as a warm up and a ramp up to next week. And I think it's, again, the calculus for everyone has changed. So I think it's just little victories. Think about, okay, Corey, Keenan, and JC are week to week. So if you can get to the point where they're healthy, where Herbert's ribs are back to at least close to being back to normal, where it's not really crushing them as much. And I just kind of think about that bye week for the most part. Like Chris, as I'm looking at the schedule, and it's like, okay, Houston, Cleveland, Denver, Seattle. That's what we're looking at. If you can, I know it's not what people want to hear, but if you can go 2-2, if you can be sitting at 3-4 and we're 5 weeks down the road and now everybody's feeling healthy, and you get the Falcons, who I think are a lot more frisky than people think. Arthur Smith's so good at calling offense, and why that team's got to win and has been in every game they've played in. But, if you can get to that point and maybe be 4-4 after that Atlanta game, okay, we're halfway through the season at 500, team is healthy. There's still a ton of talent on this team. I mean, yes, you've lost some blue chips, no doubt, but there is still a ton of talent on this roster. So that's kind of how I'm looking. Like you said, if we can do it, team can't. They got to focus on 1 week. But here, just talking out of our rear ends, we can talk in chunks like that. And I think to me, that should be a realistic goal. Win 2 of these next 4, and hopefully win 3 of these next 4, so you're 4-3 instead of 3-4 going into that bye week, and everybody's feeling better starting that second half of the season, and that's when you can start to make that push. And we were talking about this before, Chris, and you can expand on it, but look, there's a reason why people don't make predictions in the NFL at the start of the season, because it's stupid.
The AFC West.
Yeah, the AFC West has got the most losses in the AFC. 7.
They're 5-7.
This division
combined.
has the most losses of any division in the AFC right now. What was supposed to be the greatest division in the history of football, all 4 teams are going to make the playoffs, now has has a team that is 2-1, and 2 teams at 2-1 in first place, a 1-2 team in third place, and a 0-3 team in fourth place.
And if I'm not mistaken, there's only been one division game. I mean, it was Chiefs-Chargers. Like, the Raiders and Broncos will play this week.
Right.
I don't think the Broncos and the Raiders have played any other division game. So
they have not.
There's been one game. So we talk about beating each other up and losing games. That hasn't happened yet. They're 5-7 combined.
Exactly. And look, the Chiefs, we said it after week 2, ain't the same Chiefs. And the Colts showed you. And our old friend Gus, I mocked him on the pod last week saying, dude, what are you doing saying that? They gashed you 87-14 with the Raiders. Well, there ain't no Tyreek Hill to put on a linebacker, which is what they would routinely do to Gus, because we saw it with freaking Hayes Pollard and Tyreek Hill over and over again. But, like, Gus had it, and every team's going to do it. They're just going to play. They're going to play with everything in front of them. Let's see you do it down the field. And they get frustrated, and they make mistakes. and they're going to see it against the Bucs, and they're going to see it every single week. And there's a reason why the Dolphins are 3-0 with Tyreek Hill out there, because he is terrifying. And the Chiefs' offense is no longer as scary as it once was without that guy out there. So that's the other. I'm glad you brought it up, because I forgot about that we were talking about it. That's the other portion of this. You're not going to have to go 12-5 to win the AFC West.
No.
10-7 is probably going to get it done. With the way things are looking. 10-7, 11-6, very well could win you the AFC West. And that's why I said it's okay to say, hey, can we get through this at 3-4, 4-3, and get to the bye and get all these guys feeling really good? And now you've got an offense with Keenan and Mike and Gerald Everett, who's kicking ass out there, and Austin and Herbert feels good. Yeah, now we can do it. Now 10-6, 11-5. 10-6 is a possibility. Maybe 9-7 gets you a wild card at this point. There's 9-8. Like 10-7 is a real possibility now to win this division, and I think that's why you just kind of change your expectations and what you want to see from this team.
We don't tend to. Everybody overreacts after a win or a loss, and especially after a loss like this, when you lose by 4 scores to the Jags, everybody's upset. I get that, but I want to go back to what you just said, because I think these little victories, if you can get a win in Houston, get to 2-2, find a way to win in Cleveland without Deshaun Watson under center, get to 3-2. All of a sudden, guess what? You're 3-2 with a Monday Night Football game against the Broncos, and things change. The narrative shifts, and you're going to look back at this moment of adversity and be like, hey, you know what? We got through it, and it wasn't easy. We lost a lot of guys, but we found the confidence to win again. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but this is, I think, a team with guys with a lot of pride, and they don't want to go down to Houston and lose in week 4, right?
I think, and yeah, by no means. If you look at all 4 of those games, I'm just saying, I guess I was playing like worst case, reality maybe sort of thing. But yeah, best case, Jacoby Brissett is the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. He's not great. He's asked to manage games. They don't have a lot of dominant weapons at receiver. You can play the run and say, you know what? If you want to beat us by taking the top off and you beat our guys on the outside, okay, fine. So you can scheme for the Browns. Like, you can do that. They do not have a full-service offense. So if you can manage and take advantage, create some turnovers and slow down that rush attack, absolutely they can win that game in Cleveland. The Broncos' offense has been terrible. Russell Wilson has been wildly uncomfortable. Their receivers are suffering from drops. They got fumbles all over the field. So, the offense has not had a good game yet in Denver. So, I shouldn't say that. They played well, and they fumbled twice inside the 5 in Seattle. The defense played pretty well in Seattle. But outside of that, they did not play well against Houston. They scored freaking 11 points in one of the ugliest games I've ever – actually, they didn't. The offense scored 9 points because it was a safety that got them the 11 points in Houston. So, against the 49ers. So, the Denver offense can be had. It's absolutely they can go 4-0 over this stretch of games. They just need to get healthy. They need, as Brandon Staley, as I mentioned, as Brandon Staley said, they need some good news. They got a lot of bad news on Sunday. Be great to get some good news for those 4 games.
Yeah, a win. It's just amazing. A win erases so much.
100%.
A win erases so much,
and that's because the Jacksonville loss was so ugly, and that's why maybe I'm overreacting a little bit, and just kind of seeing the way they got pushed around, seeing the pressure that was in Justin's lap the entire game, the fact that they were firing through every gap anytime they tried to run the ball. It was pretty gnarly. And I'm just going to pull up. Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to just pull up the schedule from last year because I want to see what happened after the Baltimore game. So the Baltimore game, it was just so they had just put up that 28-point fourth quarter against Cleveland. You're feeling great. Then you lose 34-6 to the Ravens. Then the New England gets them. They go to Philly, win a tough one, lose one in Minnesota, win the incredible game against Pittsburgh, lose a weird one to Denver. Then you go out to Cincinnati and smash the Bengals. It's like they can bounce back. They did it all last year, and they were darn close. They were, one tackle. There's a 2nd and 11, and if you can stop them on a first, whatever it was, the 2 runs by Josh Jacobs, they're going to the playoffs. It was that close last year for all the ups and downs they had. This team's resilient. Herbert's incredible when you have a quarterback like that, anything is possible. I mean, that's the one thing to mention. If that's the funny thing about all this, Chris. If there's no rib cartilage fracture to Justin Herbert, we're not having this conversation.
Yeah.
We're like, whatever, dude. Herbert will just throw the team on his back and they'll win. He was able to do it behind an offensive line 2 years ago that had Sam Tevy, Dan Feeney, Forrest Lamp, Michael Schofield, and I can't even remember who was in for Brian Balaga because he got hurt. Oh, Trey Pipkins. And he was able to throw for almost 5,000 yards behind that line. He can do it behind this line.
His rookie season, he proved that he can do it behind any line.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter.
None of those guys are playing. None.
The one touchdown drive, Money, too, all 75 yards were on the arm of Herbert. Now, there was not one rushing yard in that. So help him out with the running game on Sunday against the Texans. I'm hopeful Austin could get things rolling on the ground, man. And it has to be one of those like first drive statement situations in the first quarter too, where you're like, all right, we're going to establish it. We're going to get up early and we're going to make sure that this crowd doesn't get into it. And the Texans know that we're here to play. And I feel like that hot start obviously was lacking last week, and they need that. I think they need to get confidence early in this game and make sure they get the dub.
Yeah, first two offensive drives were miserable against the Jags, and you could see it was just a little bit of a lack of energy, just quick underneath throws that didn't go anywhere, incompletes, runs that didn't do anything. Like I said, man, let's just I want to see that motion. I want to get creative. I want to see DeAndre Carter in a jet sweep just to threaten it right away, plant that seed. So every time he goes in motion, they're like, oh boy, he's slippery. Yeah. He's not, just get it going. Throw down the seam deep to Carter. He's so good at adjusting.
He's been great, by the way.
He has. Get it going. Open things up, get that energy, get some juice in the offense. Like you said, get the bounce in their step because they're getting big plays and chunk yards downfield, and remind them that Justin Herbert's got the greatest arm in the league. And you got one of the best quarterbacks back there. And I think it's going to happen. I really do. For all of the – I don't want to. I feel like I've had a negative tone. I feel like it's just been a very real tone. But understand, I believe they're going to come home from Houston with a win. This is an immensely winnable game. I truly believe that, and I expect them to come home with a win. And I expect the offense to perform and the defense to create turnovers, and Davis Mills to have a miserable afternoon in Houston. And then we're going to be excited, like I said, about slowing down a one-dimensional offense in Cleveland. And finding, the winning side of the ledger at 3-2 through 5 games.
I said final running game, and last thing I'll say in terms of keys to victory, get some turnovers, right? You get 3 turnovers against the Raiders. You had maybe 4 interceptions on Patrick Mahomes that either got called back or were dropped, or
they had 2 that the officials took away.
Yeah,
that's the thing. They had to. Those weren't dropped interceptions. Those were interceptions that were negated by bad officiating. So they did have the 2 turnovers there. Derwin almost had one against Trevor. I mean, it would have been an incredible interception. He was totally laid out, but he did get his hands on that ball.
Yeah.
So you almost
Trevor
had
getting the ball out of his hand was so quick. There was really not many opportunities except for maybe that one you mentioned.
Yeah, and like you said, with the Doug Peterson play calling, just the RPOs were frustrating. In terms of the defense, just identifying Kean and trying to get a jump on it. So. It was a frustrating game. Flush it, man. Just flush it. Get back after it with the Texans. Their O-line, look, Laramie Tunsil's a really good left tackle. Titus Howard's pretty good. So they have some talent up front. They don't have a lot of talent up front. They can be had. I know they signed A.J. Cannon in the offseason. Our old friend, I love Scott. Quessenberry, who's playing center. He's a good player. I thought he played really well, when he was pressed into action. So they're all right. They're okay up front. They're just not great, and they can be had. Khalil can have a Khalil game, and I believe in Chris Rumpf. I believe in Kyle Van Noy. I think there's enough there against this Houston team where we're going to be feeling pretty darn good when we're having this conversation next week.
All right. Hang in there, guys. It's going to be all right.
Exactly right.
It's going to be all right on Sunday, right? Anything else, buddy?
I'm calling a much different looking – I just think you're going to see a totally different box score with the number of carries that Austin gets, the number of catches he gets. I think you're going to see a couple carries for DeAndre Carter in there. I think you're going to see a lot more targets for Mike downfield. I think you're going to see air yards, your ADOT, your average depth of target, I think is going to jump up considerably. I just feel like this is the week where they cut it loose. They take off, they take off this sort of, hey, let's be careful, let's try to. And this just goes to show you, man, the whole don't play anyone in the preseason, you don't want anyone getting hurt. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. The Bills played all of their players in the preseason, and now their defense is decimated. They're down, one safety for the season, two safeties, which is arguably the best safety tandem in the league for a considerable amount of time.
Yeah.
Like, it happens. It's football. Guys will get hurt
a violent
in the preseason.
game.
They'll get hurt in week one, which is why I think going forward, I do think that's a legit discussion. We were talking to Tony Baselli before the game. He's such a great guy and is always cool with his time. And, I was hanging out with DJ and him and Bucky, and we were just chatting. And he was saying, he's like, man, O-line's got to play. Like, the O-line has to play together. And I think moving forward in the preseason, get those guys out there with those other combinations. So Sawyer gets some reps with Rashawn at left tackle, at right tackle. He gets reps with Trey Pipkins at left tackle. He gets reps with Corey. And, you've got to get that out there. He gets reps with Justin behind him to get a feel for what the pocket's like. I don't think there is anything wrong with that at all moving forward. And it was a real interesting point he made. He's like, I will never agree with not playing O-line in the preseason. Those guys have got to play. And, maybe that's something that changes considering we're in week 3 and you look at the injuries that the Chargers are dealing with now. It doesn't matter. It's a violent game. Guys get hurt. It's not just on the Chargers. It's, again, the Super Bowl favorite Bills were down, I think, 6 guys on defense against the Dolphins this past week. It happens, and it's going to happen to everyone.
Yeah, you look around the league, man, there's been a lot of devastating injuries to a lot of players, marquee players on teams across the league. Chargers are no different. They seem to be hitting, a lot of the guys in the top 100, right? I mean, we got like Slater, Bosa, JC, Keenan, Justin. So
just 5. Just 5 all pros. That's all.
I'm probably missing a couple. Corey, 6.
Yeah, Corey. Exactly.
Unbelievable. Yeah. All right, man. Hey, positive vibes going into Houston. See if they can get a dub, get to 2-2, and then play the Cleveland Browns.
Absolutely.
Let's do it. For Money, I'm Chris. We'll see you guys next week.